Task 1. You are going to hear 8 different extracts of book reviews from the radio. Read headings from B to I carefully and listen to the recordings. In block capitals, write the letter of the heading which goes with each recording in the space provided. There is one extra heading that does not go with any of the recordings. Answers must be based exclusively on the information in the recording.
0.
Example.
Another newish book, and absolutely wonderful. It's set in the 1990s, at the end of the dot-com bubble, just as it's bursting, set in a failing ad agency in Chicago. One morning they go in and there's no flowers in the lobby. The next morning the staff is being fired. And what comes out is all of that pettiness, all of that nastiness, all of that infighting. And there is a great scene of people arguing over who is going to get the chair of someone who is fired, because it's one of those very expensive, ergonomically correct chairs.
1.
It's a book that takes place over maybe a period of 5 years, and it's a period in which Bob's dad dies. His mother is kind of sinking into dementia. But mostly it's a book about his love for all the animals that he and his wife have, including Bertie the rabbit, Howard the dove, Stanley Sue the grey African parrot, numerous ducks, numerous geese. It's a book that, I have to say, in many other places, when I was reading this book I was laughing so hard I could barely breathe, because the accounts are so funny.
2.
And the book is about a young woman named Flora Post, who has recently been orphaned, and she has to decide which of her relatives to go live with. And she decides that she will go live with her relatives, the Starcadders, who live on a kind of decaying farm called Cold Comfort Farm. And Flora is one of those determined young women who realizes that if she puts her mind to it, she can change everybody's life for the better. And the Starcadders absolutely need somebody to come in and make their lives better. And Flora takes all of this assorted family and sorts them out and sets them on their way. And it's an absolute delight to read.
3.
Craig Childs is a wilderness guide and a naturalist, and this is a book that is filled with his different encounters with all sorts of animals in the wild. It's a book that, I have to say, I read it in such a state of heightened anxiety, because the things that he does in search of these animals are things that most of us, kind of city-bound folks, would find it very, very difficult to do.
4.
And it's an absolutely perfect book for that, because it's Alan Alberg's book called Previously. And in this book we learn what happened before the obvious event of each nursery rhyme or fairy tale. So this is what happened before Goldilocks got at the 3 bears' house. How she ran into Jack and Jill, and what happened before they fell down the hill. And what happened with the Frog Prince. And the wonderful thing about this picture book is, as in the best picture books I think, the text and the pictures really have to be of the same spirit, and here they are.
5.
This is the shore of Australia, and the way I would best describe the broken shore is that it's a great mystery with a social conscience. And when I read this, actually, Steve, I thought, if you would read a mystery, this might be one that you would very much enjoy. But the main character is a policeman named Joe Cashin who lives in a suburb outside Melbourne. And he's on leave of absence because of a terrible accident that occurred in the course of duty. But a very wealthy man in his district is attacked and left for dead. And the 2 suspects appear to be 2 Aboriginal young men.
6.
This is non-fiction, and it's a fascinating story of a man named Cy Oggins who really fell in love with Soviet communism at a young age and was betrayed by those ideals. He was an American who, he and his wife Norma, had such strong ideals about what communism could do for the world. They were sent as members of the Comintern, sent to China, did spying in China, some in Europe. Then Norma came back to the United States, and Sai was taken to the prison camps in Siberia.
7.
But the main two characters are two policemen, a young man named Rob, who, when he was a child, was involved in a very mysterious situation where he was playing in the woods with two friends. The friends disappeared never to be found again, and he was found late in the evening with blood in his shoes. No memory of anything that's happened. And his parents sent him away. Went to a very posh boarding school, but decides to be a policeman, comes back to Dublin and gets a job, and then a young girl goes missing in those same woods.
Task 2. You will hear part of a radio programme in which a reviewer talks about a newly published book about a woman called Natalie Hardcastle. For questions 1 to 10, complete the sentences.
This account of the life of Natalie Hardcastle begins with Natalie and her 3 young sons left alone on an isolated Australian ranch. Their house is a wooden hut with a hole in the roof. There is no running water or electricity, and there are no neighbors for 100 miles in any direction. More importantly, there is no husband to support the family. This is the low point in Natalie's fortunes, and the real story of the biography lies in how she and her sons come to terms with the disaster which life and her husband deal out to them. At intervals throughout the book, we're told how she came to be in this position. We learn of her childhood and youth in 1950s Sydney, about her dreams of Olympic fame, and about the riding accident which crushed her ankle, and with it, all her hopes of sporting achievement. We learn, too, of her meeting with Tony Hardcastle, a wealthy businessman and racing driver. He sweeps her off her feet and into marriage. Only then do we learn, as she learns, of the flaws in his character, with the risky business ventures he favors, which lead to financial disaster and cause her to be stranded, penniless, in the Australian outback. Tony leaves her to restart his racing career in Europe, which isn't a success. He returns to Australia, but not to Natalie. At this point, Natalie decides to try to keep the family together and start her own business venture. She sets up a traveling clothes shop and beauty parlor in a van. She converts an old delivery van and buys clothes from Sydney. Traveling at the weekends, with her children sleeping in the back, she visits small outback towns where the women greet her enthusiastically. They've never had these luxuries before. At last, Natalie begins to make some money, but then disaster strikes. Tony comes back and forbids her to continue her business. Soon the money she's saved is gone and her financial problems return. Ordinary mortals might have given up at this stage, but not Natalie Hardcastle. Of course, there are moments when she feels depressed, or when she lies awake at night worrying about how she's going to pay the bills. But she's a fighter who refuses to give in to misfortune. Enough drama for one life, you might think. But fate and Tony Hardcastle haven't finished with her yet. Financial disaster hasn't dimmed her husband's taste for losing money. His sudden death in a barroom fight uncovers huge debts and relatives keen to take every penny from his estate, even if it leaves his family starving. Hard work, along with good luck and a surprise win in the state lottery, gives her time to keep the creditors at bay until she can afford to pay them off. It's a remarkable story, and one that made me look at my own duller but far safer husband in an altogether more positive light.